Greetings, every pony. My name is Spearheart, and welcome to THC. I'll be your narrator for the night. Whether it be ghosts, goblins, ghouls, demons, gore, or violence, you can expect it here. Here we narrate stories, just like the other uploads on this channel, but with a kiss of death. This series is heavily inspired by Markiplier, Corey Kenshin, Venturian Tale, Nuke's Top 5, and of course, Chills. If you like this sort of content, be sure to check out their channels, or don't. Now, how about we read the description? Also, quick side note, here we don't read the stories before narrating them. We just go with the flow. Rainbow Dash and Applejack have a similar experience that Rarity had when they visit an abandoned building. The Cult Home. Written by TheEvilCookie. Chapter 1. Going inside the abandoned area. Rainbow Dash was doing push-ups outside in Ponyville as she wanted to work out while the weather was still nice. She wanted to exercise for an hour before she went to see her friends, as she hadn't exercised at all that week due to helping her friends out. She knew that she didn't want to exercise too much, as she was already tired out from the work, so she would have to take a break from exercising. After she exercised for a bit more, someone called out to her. She turned around and saw Applejack walking up to her. Rainbow Dash stopped what she was doing so she could talk to her best friend. Howdy, Rainbow. I was watching from afar. If you're tired, y'all can come over to my place, she offered. No, that's okay. I'm just going to go home now. Thanks anyway, Rainbow Dash answered. How long have y'all been out here? Applejack asked. How long have you been looking for me? Rainbow Dash countered. Applejack rolled her eyes. That doesn't matter. Look, I was looking for you earlier, but you weren't around anyway. I was worried about you. Won't you please come with me? Applejack answered. For what exactly? To throw me a party? Look, not right now, okay? I'm really not in the mood for company, Rainbow Dash said as she started to walk home while taking a drink of water. Look, it's not a party. Won't you just come with me? It will be well worth it, Applejack asked. We aren't leaving Ponyville, are we? Because I don't feel like I want to go on a trip to someplace in Equestria, Rainbow Dash asked. No, we aren't. The place is in Ponyville. Just come with me and you'll find out. It will be adventures, trust me, Applejack said with a grin. Rainbow Dash gave up and agreed, since she knew that Applejack was honest, so she could trust her. They both walked into Ponyville and walked past the shops and houses. They could see Twilight's castle at the end and Celestia's palace above them in Canterlot. So, where are we going exactly? This isn't going to be a 7 minutes in heaven thing, right? Rainbow Dash asked. Applejack raised an eyebrow. That's a strange guess. No, not really, unless you want to do that. So you want to make out or get laid? Applejack teased. Rainbow Dash blushed. No, not really. I was just guessing, Rainbow Dash said. Applejack shook her head as she had a little smile now gracing her lips as she continued to guide Rainbow Dash. Soon, they got to an abandoned building and went inside. Rainbow Dash stared at Applejack with an unsure look. Applejack? Is this what you wanted to show me? Rainbow Dash asked. Applejack nodded her head as she walked inside. Soon, Applejack stopped and went over to Rainbow Dash. Do you remember when Rarity discovered that house of where that evil butcher dude lived? Applejack asked. Yeah, I do. He was the most evil man who ever lived in Equestria. Why are you asking me this? Rainbow Dash asked, hesitantly, as she was not liking where this was going. But at the same time, she was very eager to know about the place she was now in. Well, this place is even worse than that house, and I'll tell you why, Applejack whispered. She pulled Rainbow Dash by the hand, and they went deeper into the building. Soon they stopped, and Applejack spoke. A long time ago, this cult rented this building in this very town years after Nightmare Moon had been imprisoned and committed sacrificial murders in it. The cult kidnapped tourists and did gruesome things to them. The authorities found out and shut the building down, Applejack explained. And you thought it was a good idea to bring me here? Rainbow Dash explained with anger. I thought you would find it interesting, Applejack explained. No, I don't. It sounds worse than the house of the butcher, Rainbow Dash said. They continued to look around, only to hear a voice. Kill the non-believers! It shouted. Rainbow Dash and Applejack screamed and ran back to the exit and got outside. They panted heavily. Holy fuck! I didn't know Equestria had so much fucked up shit, Applejack exclaimed. We should tell Rarity! Rainbow Dash exclaimed. So that's just what they did as they went to Carousel Boutique, and they explained what happened to Rarity. And Rarity brought up her similar experience with the butcher's old house. They told Celestia about what happened, and Celestia repeated what she had said to Rarity. They both apologized and went back home. All three of them agreed to never go into cursed, haunted places after that, as both of their experiences weren't pleasant. Celestia knocked the entire factory down due to it being way too much of a negative place for Equestria. After that, she had the old butcher's home knocked down as well, and then told them information about the cult. It turns out that the cult had kidnapped and killed several innocent people inside the factory for strange religious reasons. Celestia never explained the exact reason why, as she didn't know herself, but all she knew was that it was for something religious. Celestia hoped that none of her subjects would continue going into evil places that some of them wanted. She wished they could stick to less darker places that were haunted, but not haunted to the point of scaring someone, scarring someone for life. But she also knew that curiosity got the best of her subjects, and this curiosity would continue making them explore terrible places in Equestria. She hoped that these terrible crimes that caused these places to be tainted would stop someday, because if the crime stopped, then Equestria would be one step closer to a more better home for her subjects. She couldn't wait for that day to come, as it just couldn't come to Equestria soon enough. The end. Fluttershy shares a tender, loving moment with a gigantic tarantula. Enjoy and keep a bottle of brain bleach at hand. Based on this story, Arachnophobic, hairy love. Yuck. Arachnophillia. Written by Ocalhoun. Chapter 1. Legs. Lots of legs. With a contented sigh, Fluttershy went through the door, back into her own cozy little cottage. It had been a long, hard day spent with her friends. She liked them, she really did. But being in social situations always sapped her energy, leaving her feeling drained when she finally found an excuse to go. And yet, she didn't want to completely reject such things. She just needed her alone time afterward. Her cottage was where she could rejuvenate herself, recharge. All her animals were there, and even though she had to take care of all of them, they somehow seemed to demand less of her than any ponies. She felt more comfortable around them, as if she could finally be herself, not having to put on a personable act. She slowly made her rounds, feeding, petting, cajoling, chastising, whichever each critter needed. Of course, there, crouched in the corner, with her legs huddled in around her, was Fluttershy's newest house guest. Petunia was a marvelous creature, astoundingly huge, the size of a pony, and for all her shy aloofness, a very sweet little thing. She was covered in a fine bristle of little brown hairs and had the cutest little beady black eyes. And, oh yes, Petunia was an enormous tarantula, the biggest Fluttershy had ever seen by far. The first time her friends had seen Petunia, They'd been certain that she was a monster invading from the ever-free forest. But Fluttershy had soon put a stop to that. Sure, Petunia had come from the Everfree, and sure, she looked monstrous, but she had a heart, or the arachnoid equivalent of a heart, of pure gold. Hi, Petunia. Eat any good flies lately? The spider unfurled her legs a little and clicked her mandibles together. She had a few feathers stuck in the bristles around her mouth. Wasn't that sweet? She'd taken her time to help preen a bird or two. Petunia was finally opening up and getting to know the other animals. They all still huddled in fear of the giant spider, but Fluttershy was sure they'd come around eventually. Petunia's little black eyes glinted. Such a magnificent and fascinating creature. Fluttershy sat down on the couch near the corner, hoping to coax Petunia out of her sulk. The spider retreated further into the corner, molding herself into its shape as best she could, which was pretty impressive. She'd made herself a little more than a big ball of bristles and legs wedged in there. Oh, don't be frightened, Petunia. Fluttershy patted the couch next to her. Why don't you come and sit with me? The spider stirred. At her first motion, all the other critters in the room scattered, leaving just the two of them alone. Startled by the sudden motion, Petunia returned to her corner as well. It's okay. They'll get used to you and come around eventually. Don't be scared. Fluttershy patted the couch cushion again. Long minutes passed, but eventually Petunia stirred again. Her legs made strange, dry, creaky, rustling noises as she unfurled again. This time, edging halfway up the wall to raise her eyes above the level of the couch's edge. Fluttershy gave her best charming smile. There you are. Aren't you beautiful? Petunia stayed there, sideways against the wall, for a long while, staring. It was incredible how far the spider's many legs could reach up the wall. She wasn't even as high as she could go, and her legs already stretched beyond the top of the window frame. Fluttershy smiled and leaned closer to her newest friend, just as Petunia moved forward as well. Neither had been expecting the other to move. They froze where they stopped, and Fluttershy noticed with utter shock that her lips were touching Petunia's outer mandibles. Had they kissed? She jumped back, and the spider did as well. Petunia didn't stop until she was all the way back, huddled in her corner, while Fluttershy touched where the spines had poked her muzzle, blushing furiously. Some traitorous little voice inside her told her that she'd enjoyed that, even that she'd planned for that to happen, which was of course ridiculous. She blushed harder and looked at Petunia, huddled in her corner. What had the spider thought of that little exchange? Did she enjoy it? It was difficult to tell. Spiders were always hard to read, but Fluttershy liked to imagine that Petunia enjoyed it as well. Author's note. This story is brought to you thanks and in part by my Patreon supporters. They're invaluable for keeping me focused and motivated to write with the power of the deadline. If you'd like to help keep me writing, please check out my Patreon page. And now for the last story. For generations, accords between Equestria and Griffony have forbidden griffons from hunting ponies or consuming their flesh. There are those among the griffons who find these concessions distasteful and talk of returning to the old ways, but most would not dare risk the wrath of the princesses by violating the treaties. Gaspard is not most griffins. He still has his pride and his prey. Predator. Written by Rinnaul. Chapter 1. Prey. The wind rushes through my crest and the feathers on my chest as I drift through the air. The sun is bright in this desolate little corner of Equestria that I've adopted. It is full of clear terrain, lots of grasslands, lakes, and dry rocky flats. The abundance of thermals generated by this combination of weather and terrain makes today nearly perfect for flying. A relaxing day of flying isn't what I have in mind, though. I'm in Equestria for a reason. Ponies dominate this whole region. There are more of them than any other race. No pony dares raise a claw against them. And even though the oh-so-proud minotaurs grovel at the hooves of their princess, we even speak their language for Ruck's sake. How many ponies even know we had our own language? How many griffins? It isn't even taught to the youth of Griffony anymore. It's considered an academic interest and preserved by a handful of eggheads in the halls of nobility. If we've surrendered so much of our culture to the will of Equestria, then we forget our own language. I know there's no hope that anyone remembers our former relationship with the ponies. They feared us, and we hunted them. We are predators, and they are prey. It's bad enough we let them believe they're exempt from the natural order simply because their hornheads can use magic, but with each generation comes new concessions. First we gave up hunting the ponies, then we gave up hunting buffalo, then the donkeys, the zebras, and even the cattle. Everything with hooves were forbidden. What does a griffin eat now, then? Fish? Of course, even the ponies will eat fish from time to time. That is, until one of them gets a talking to fish flank stamp. Then fish will be our friends, and it would just be awful to hurt one. Why not join us in a meal of grass and apples? Damned weaklings. And now there are griffons, or at least griffin-shaped kittens, so desperate to please their tiny pastel overlords that they've even given up on that. I don't care how good those nuts or fruit or bean paste vomit from nigh poon are supposed to be. If you don't eat meat, you're not a predator. And if you're not a predator, you're not a griffin. I am a griffin. I might even call myself something of a traditionalist. And I found what I'm looking for. I banked towards one of the few clouds in this part of the sky, alighting on it and ensuring I remain unseen as I study it. A mare, I think, very small and slender, with a yellow coat and pink mane. At first, it seems she's just a particularly small earth pony, but then she flutters her wings for a moment. A Pegasus. Good. That makes it more fun. They tend to give the best chases. I take off from the cloud and circle around until I'm in position where she wouldn't notice my shadow over her. Until I'm too close. And then dive. There's nothing quite like diving on prey. It's not just the exhilaration of the ground rushing up towards you, though that certainly carries a thrill of its own. The real drawl of it is the realization of your own strength, that you hold this creature's life in your talons, that they can do nothing to stop you, that you are their superior in every way, and that this is your natural place. I'm getting close. I could angle upwards and snap her neck, killing her instantly, but I'm in the mood for sport. I adjust downwards slightly and aim for her wings, closer and closer, and she hasn't even looked up yet. Oh, foolish ponies, you've forgotten your prey for so long that you no longer know how to defend yourselves. I slam my talons into her back and both feel and hear the satisfying crunch as the fragile bones in her wings snap under the force of my dive. She screams. The impact buckles her legs, and I slam her face into the ground with her mouth open like that. I'm sure she ate some grass and dirt. There, little pony. I'm being courteous. I gave you a last meal. I dig my talons into her back for good measure before I kick off again, ripping apart a chunk of skin and muscle, lean as it is, as I do, even if I hadn't clipped her wings on the first strike. The damage I did on takeoff would have grounded her. I soar back up and circle once, considering what to do next. Do I hide behind the cloud again and leave her wondering what could have happened to her? Or do I remain in plain sight and give chase for a while? Ah, she's made the decision for me. You finally thought to look up, did you? I'd say you've learned a valuable lesson today, but you won't have the chance to make use of it. She's pulling herself from the dirt and struggling to move, weeping all the while. How did we ever let such pathetic creatures think themselves our superiors? A few staggering steps and adrenaline is starting to numb her to the pain and steel her against the rapid blood loss. Her coat is as much red as yellow now, the blood flowing down her barrel and dripping onto the grass beneath her. And yet she's somehow managing to run. Granted, it's slow and stumbling, and I can see how pained her breathing is from here, but I'm impressed she made the effort. I dive again. She looks up and sees me coming. The look in her eyes is one of absolute terror. That feeling of power I mentioned before, this is when you really feel it. She knows how this is going to end. I swoop down at her flank, but she throws herself to the side, rolling into the dirt to get away. Good move, little pony. If you hadn't gotten away, I'd likely have broken that leg, and then this wouldn't be any fun for either of us. I use my momentum to wheel back up into the sky, watching her again. There's a long smear of blood where she fell, and dirt covers that side of her body, sticking to the blood soaked into her coat, and she still pushes herself to her hoofs, even more shakily now. I think that tumble took something out of her beyond the blood loss. She starts staggering away again, and I see where she's been heading. There's a rock pile a few dozen yards away, and I manage she thinks she'll be able to hide herself there. Another dive. I'm nearer the ground now and won't build up quite as much speed. My talons will be more than enough though. She doesn't expect me to strike again so soon, and I'm nearly on top of her when she looks up again. She tries to throw herself to the side again, but her wounds are slowing her down too much, and I'm too close. My talons dig into her flesh, ripping apart skin and muscle down deep enough to expose the bone. I've landed the blow right on her flank, and the mark there is obliterated. It seems to have been a group of small bank shapes, but I can't tell what they were anymore, and I don't really care either. I flap my wings a few more times, giving her space once again, but she's not moving. She's just lying there, staring at the rock pile as she reaches forward with one forehoof. I land nearby and approach. Her head snaps back to me, and she just stares at me. Her eyes are wide with fear, and tears stream from them constantly. She doesn't say anything, instead, weakly gasping for breath between her sobs. "Aren't you gonna run anymore, little pony?" I ask. She starts to choke on her tears now, the coughing sobs racking her body, the only response I get. I wonder if I can draw anything else from her before the end. "You aren't as much fun as I hoped," I tell her. I place one claw around her neck and hold her down. She cries out a moment as shifting puts a new strain on her wounds, but then goes back to her weeping. The other claw I run along her side, pondering where to begin on her. I start watching her face, seeing how she reacts, and then when I hit the point she seems to cringe the most at, just above her hind leg, I pause. I give it just long enough for her to wonder what I'm planning, then shove my talon into her. Blood gushes out as she shuts her eyes, clenches her teeth, and writhes on the ground under me. When I start pulling my talon upward, carving her open, she managed to hold back for just a few seconds, her mouth hanging open as she lay there gasping. But after just a few more inches, she gives in and is screaming once more. I wonder how long she can scream before that gives out too. Well, I'm not that hungry. I suppose I can take my time and find out. I always appreciate some entertainment before a meal. Author's note. So, this might be the darkest thing I've written yet. I was going for a sort of rapist vibe with Gaspard's casual yet monstrous hatred, and I, in fact, briefly considered having him rape her in the process. But then I decided that his absolute hatred of ponies and his belief that they should be nothing but food meant that wouldn't fit the character. And no, this isn't something I relate to in any way, but I like my villains to be complete monsters, and I don't hold back when I go for that. The end.